Granger. Amostar led them down to the first floor. When she asked, he smiled. I've heard from other professors that finding key information amidst mountains of text is your specialty, Miss Granger. You can assist with the two tasks I just mentioned. I'll try not to interfere with your regular studies. If I haven't found answers by next Saturday, you can come to the library and help. Because of the second half of Friday's Defense Against the Dark Arts practical, Ron had spent nearly 2 full days lying in his dorm bed. Now, he no longer dared to claim that facing the 8-legged spider with the third, fourth, and fifth years was lucky. I'm beginning to understand Malfoy's opinion of Professor Brain, Harry. When Harry, full of thoughts, returned to the dormitory, Ron gazed weakly at the 4-poster bed's curtains and said, who in their right mind would carry something like that around and show it to younger students? Taking on such a terrifying dark creature should be the work of aurors. After Harry recounted the night's events in full, Ron's previous half-dead expression was replaced by a gleam of admiration. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he quickly asked, did Professor Brain explain in detail how to store magic in your eyes? Sometimes Ron's bluntness could be exasperating. Harry said warily, that's definitely not a simple spell, Ron. Even a genius like Professor Brain spent quite a long time mastering this magic he designed himself. Ron pursed his lips, glanced at the group of students laughing together, Seamus, Neville, and Dean, and his tone grew serious. Whether or not that old Slytherin lunatic actually hid a snake in the chamber, Harry, I think that as long as Professor Brain is at the school, his successors won't dare appear again. Once Colin and Justin Finch-Fletchley from Hufflepuff are back to normal, this matter should be completely resolved. I'm not dismissing Professor Brain's deduction, Ron, Harry murmured, frowning. I just feel like I've overlooked something, and I think that before the Board of Governors even considers letting Professor Brain leave Hogwarts, he should find the chamber. Otherwise, if that monster ever stirs trouble again, who else can we rely on? That's when I realized something was off, Ron. Lying in bed, a spark of insight hit Harry. He suddenly sat upright, ignoring Ron's startled stare, and dashed to his desk, rifling through his backpack. Just now, Harry had remembered something crucial. He had actually seen the monster in the chamber before. Back in the memory Tom Riddle had shown him. It had been massive, with a low, furry body, several black, tangled legs, numerous glittering eyes, and 2 pincers as sharp as knives. No matter how you looked at it, that thing didn't resemble a snake. Where exactly had the mistake occurred? Harry's brow furrowed as he opened his notebook, his expression grave. Professor Brain's speculations sounded perfectly reasonable. It neatly explained why that terrifying sound hadn't been heard by anyone else. Who would have thought that the creature could move so stealthily through the pipes? Yet the hidden past that Riddle had shown Harry carried an equally undeniable fact. After Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts, no attacks occurred, and Riddle himself had even received a special merit award from the school for it. Harry, I really think you should just get rid of that notebook. I've got a bad feeling about this Tom Riddle. Ron, sitting on the bed, frowned as he watched Harry spread the notebook open on the table and immediately pick up his quill again. Don't be ridiculous, Ron, Harry said without looking up. Riddle's memory gave us some incredibly valuable information, didn't it? As Harry's ink touched the paper, the blank pages instantly filled with those elegant, deliberate letters. Hello, Harry Potter. I thought that after the truth about the Chamber of Secrets came to light, you would have forgotten me, left to gather dust in some corner of the bookshelf for another 50 dark years. By the way, I assume Rubeus Hagrid is still at the school. Did you ever tell anyone else the truth I showed you in my memory? Harry's face flushed, but there was no time for pleasantries. He cut straight to the point, explaining what he had discovered tonight. Riddle, perhaps you misunderstood something. From what I can tell, Professor Brain's guess seems more reasonable, but the creature you showed me in your memory, I didn't get a clear look, yet it was obviously not a snake, right? This time, the notebook didn't respond immediately. It seemed confused by Harry's words. 2 minutes later, in a messy, scrawled script, it asked, can you tell me more about this Professor Brain? Chapter 74, Convergence, Monday noon. Harry sat gloomily at the dining table, surrounded by mountains of syrup, tarts, roasted eels, beef, and lamb racks, none of which sparked even a flicker of appetite. Across the hall, Draco Malfoy's ridiculous imitations made Harry's mood even worse. Honestly, Harry, Ron, sitting beside him, looked worried. I think that notebook's really scrambled your brain. Otherwise, why would you take off your earmuffs while tending to the mandrakes? That morning, Professor Sprout had them repot some healthy mandrakes into brighter pots. Distracted and unsettled by Riddle's notebook the night before, Harry had inexplicably removed his earmuffs. The result was predictable. Dozens of nearly grown mandrakes shrieked at once, sending Harry tumbling headfirst into the garden bed. Professor Sprout had screamed in shock, nearly fainting herself. It does seem suspicious, Harry. Hermione glanced at Professor Brain, who sat at the staff table with deep, dark circles under his eyes, then frowned at Harry. Why would you think that a notebook left in total darkness for 50 years is more reasonable than Professor Brain's deduction? Harry couldn't deny that his poor state that morning had something to do with the notebook, yet Riddle's theory carried some weight. According to the memory, the sound Harry heard in Professor Lockhart's office and near Mrs.'s Norris might have simply been a normal snake hunting in the pipes. Riddle's memory insisted that 50 years ago, the creature that killed a girl in the lavatory was the same monster Hagrid had been caring for, its name unknown. Headmaster Dipet was wiser than Dumbledore, Harry. The Ministry back then was more objective, too. Otherwise, how could they have expelled a young wizard so easily if they weren't certain? Ron and Hermione exchanged glances. Based on the results of the attacks 50 years ago, Riddle was likely correct. Emotionally, however, they were more inclined to trust Professor Brain's guess. Let's put this aside for now, Harry, Hermione said, frowning. I can go with Professor Brain to the library this weekend to look for references. If I can find a snake capable of killing and petrifying Harry, then I think it's time to hand over the notebook. Are you talking about this afternoon's practical class? Neville poked his round, chubby head over the table, his small eyes filled with concern. Oh, damn, I forgot about that! Hermione glanced up at Professor Brain, who was above the hall discussing something with Professors Flitwick and McGonagall. He slammed his hand on the table, making even Harry draw a sharp breath. Because so few students had volunteered for the practical class, on Monday afternoon's Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson, Amostar spent half the time explaining to the first and second years about the kinds of traps ancient wizards like to hide in magical ruins, and the methods dark wizards often used to poison or ambush people. Only after that did he lead the group of young witches and wizards up to the 8th floor classroom where the Inferi were hidden. Do you really think a freelancer who runs errands, fetches potion ingredients, or delivers packages would know dark wizards' habits this well? On the way to the 8th floor, Seamus whispered to Dean, I have an uncle who used to be an Auror but retired due to injury. Dean's tone and expression were mysterious. He once told me there's a type of person who isn't employed by the Ministry but makes a living hunting dark wizards. These people are called bounty hunters in private. I think Professor Brain, before coming to Hogwarts, was one of those wizard hunters. Dean's deduction earned nods of approval from many. Even Hermione blinked thoughtfully. Besides that, there's no other reasonable explanation. Ron, who had decided to skip the practical, said seriously to Harry, I've heard Dad mention that the Ministry sometimes collaborates with unofficial specialists to take down dark wizards or smugglers. These people are incredibly capable, but they don't like being bound by rules, which is why they don't join the Ministry directly. Although Amostar walked at the front without turning back, his immense magical power gave him hyper-aware senses. Every whispered word of the students reached his ears. Bounty hunters. Huh. Amostar smiled inwardly. He wasn't a bounty hunter, he was the dark wizard being hunted by them. Now! Standing before the oak door, Amostar turned to the young witches and wizards, whose expressions had grown serious, and read their names aloud. Harry Potter, Draco Malfoy, Hermione Granger, Daphne Greengrass, Neville Longbottom, Hannah Abbott, Ginny Weasley, Michael Corner, Blaise Zabini, Theodore Knott, Eloise Midgen, Terry Boot. Pair up in the order I've read the names and enter the classroom maze. Amasta looked at Harry and Draco, whose faces had gone pale, and smiled. This maze has memory capabilities. It has recorded your progress from last time, so I hope you make the most of this final chance. A small bonus, if anyone defeats the dark creature inside, I will award 50 points to their house. Gulp. Harry swallowed, and green eyes wide, a flicker of excitement mixed with his fear. In a student's life, how often would one have a chance to earn 50 points for their house? Many students might not earn that much from first through seventh year combined. Hermione, meanwhile, was visibly anxious. She realized that once away from textbooks and notes, her ability to respond on the spot was far below what she considered acceptable. Harry and Draco, again, reluctantly stood together. Harry's selfless act last time had calmed Draco for a few days, but the effect didn't last. Draco now regarded Harry's gesture as a slight and had been mocking him with renewed vigor. This time, it's different, Potter. Before entering, Draco said aggressively, producing a silver dagger from his pocket, the one he normally used for potion ingredients. If you beg me nicely, maybe I'll have the mercy to let you live. Harry had heard whispers that Draco had privately asked Professor Brain about the object defense charm, and it seemed he had gained some mastery over the powerful spell. Professor Brain, are you sure you gave us any hint? Begged Draco to protect him. That was harder for Harry than fighting him. He looked pitifully at Professor Brain, hoping for some reassurance, but the professor merely smiled calmly, saying nothing. Harry's brow twitched. The first time he entered the maze, Professor Brain had smiled in the same way, warning him that the maze was dark and to watch his step. Dark? Suddenly, Harry's eyes widened. He seemed to have remembered something. Chapter 75, The Thief. Just 5 minutes later, Harry burst out of the classroom, cheering, while Draco followed behind, glum and dragging his feet. And, I did it, Professor. I really did it. The moment Harry stepped out of the classroom, he rushed to Professor Brain, who had been expecting him, and shouted with excitement, I understood your hint, Professor. It was actually so simple. I just used a small spell and defeated them. How did you manage that, Harry? Hermione, recovering first from her stunned state, dashed in front of Harry, her fingers trembling with excitement. Excellent work, Potter. Brain smiled with satisfaction. The method itself is secondary. What truly matters is that you overcame your fear, and that is remarkable. Undoubtedly, the winner, Potter, I'm awarding Gryffindor 50 points. Also, he turned to Draco, who had been somewhat overlooked, and smiled. Completing the final strike isn't the only thing that matters. Facing a dangerous, dark creature and choosing courage over retreat is equally admirable. Malfoy, you've earned Slytherin 30 points as well. No matter what, both Harry and Draco had accomplished what most others could not. Young witches and wizards cheered for them with admiration. Ron leapt in joy, tossing Harry's bag into the air, scattering textbooks everywhere. Harry grinned from ear to ear, completely unbothered by the mess. Draco, now surrounded by Slytherin students, no longer looked so glum. He discreetly glanced at Brain, and when he saw the professor smiling back at him, Draco shyly pressed his lips together and lowered his proud head. No one noticed that Ginny, upon seeing the notebook fly out of Harry's bag, suddenly went pale and froze in place. In the end, no other group managed to find a way to defeat the Inferi. Yet, compared to the first encounter, the students' morale was noticeably better. They didn't collapse one by one as they had after leaving the maze the first time. Brain repaired Neville's robe with magic, stood by the classroom's oak door, and awarded 10 points to each student who had persevered to the end. At this moment, the magical contract had fully lost its effect, and he could finally explain to the students how to deal with the Inferi properly. These are extremely evil dark creatures, challenging even the moral limits of a wizard. When thousands of Inferi gather into a massive army, they can indeed pose a serious threat. But when their numbers are limited, dealing with them is quite manageable. Brain glanced at Harry, who already knew the answer, and smiled. How many noticed my warning before Mr. Potter first entered the classroom? Dark creatures generally dislike light, Hermione muttered, slapping her forehead in realization. Fire right, Professor? Like Devil's Snare, Inferi prefer darkness and damp. We just needed a flame spell to handle them. Thanks to the full points Harry and his group earned, the gap between Gryffindor and Slytherin narrowed. keeping Gryffindor's hopes of defending the House Cup alive. During dinner, Professor McGonagall even stopped by to check on second-year course selections and offered Harry an encouraging smile. All the older students knew what Inferi were, so for a second year to defeat them using intelligence and courage was truly impressive. That evening, Gryffindor Common Room held a grand celebration. Fred and George brought a large stock of butterbeer from Hogsmeade. Harry, fond of the mild drink, soon found himself delightfully tipsy amid the cheering crowd. Despite Professor Brain's clear hint, Harry hadn't initially realized Inferi's fear of fire. Hermione, still miffed, retrieved several hefty books on Inferi from the library and sulked by the fireplace, reading in quiet revenge. Congratulations, Harry, another incredible achievement. By the end of the feast, Wood squeezed through the crowd to raise a toast to Harry. Before Harry could smile sheepishly, Wood added, "I'm sure you haven't forgotten our match against Hufflepuff this Saturday." Right? Hick. Of course not, Harry burped loudly. Without Ron's support, he might not have stayed upright. I promise I'll give it my all, Wood. You only need to promise me one thing, Harry. Harry's casual tone annoyed Wood. He frowned. Win the match and send those Hufflepuff idiots packing. Oh, heavens. Fred and George opened their mouths to say something, but just then Percy emerged from the fat lady's portrait after completing his night duty. Upon seeing the chaotic common room, his face went from disbelief to fury as he shouted, "Is it too early to celebrate Easter, everyone? If you've been paying attention, you know tomorrow is Tuesday, a day for classes." "Don't be such a killjoy, Percy." George waved an empty bottle angrily. "Harry and the others just earned Gryffindor a full 100 points. We're celebrating the House Cup in advance. Clean this up and go to bed immediately." Percy ignored George's protest, glaring at anyone who met his eye. Even if Gryffindor wins the House Cup for the next 10 years, that is no excuse for breaking the rules. The following days were rough for Harry. Professor Snape, clearly displeased by Harry's prominence, was harsher than usual in potions class that Tuesday afternoon. Half of the points Harry, Hermione, and Neville had earned in the Defense Against the Dark Arts practical session were deducted by Snape. In class, Snape mocked Harry, claiming that the swelling potion he brewed could kill a dragon. To teach him a lesson, Snape demanded that Harry's post-class essay be 1.5 times longer than that of any Slytherin student. Meanwhile, Oliver Wood officially kicked off pre-match training. Every afternoon after classes, and sometimes even before dinner, he rounded up the entire team and dragged them to the pitch. They weren't allowed to return until the moon was high in the sky. Fred and George privately told Harry that with Wood's training regimen, Gryffindor could not only win the Hogwarts Quidditch Cup, but, if they kept at it for 2 more months, could even compete in the World Cup. It was clear the Gryffindor team was confident about winning this year. During this period, however, something unsettling happened. On Wednesday night, as Harry returned from practice, he saw Neville rushing out of the dormitory, panic written all over his face. "Harry, I don't know who did it. I just found out." Neville looked terrified and pushed open the door. Harry's trunk had been emptied everywhere. His clothes lay crumpled on the floor, the sheets had been ripped from his 4-poster bed, and the drawers of his bedside table were pulled open, their contents scattered across the mattress. Harry gaped in shock, stepping on several loose pages that had fallen from Travels with Trolls. As he and Neville remade the bed, Ron, Seamus, and Dean walked in. Dean immediately shouted, "What happened, Harry?" "I don't know." Harry frowned and shrugged. Ron began examining Harry's clothes carefully and noticed that every pocket had been turned inside out, and Harry's bag was flipped completely upside down. "Looks like someone was looking for something," Ron said, his expression serious. "I don't think it's Ginny, Harry." "Check. See if anything's missing." It didn't take long for Harry to realize that Riddle's diary was gone. The next day, when he told Hermione, her expression was barely less alarmed than Neville's the previous night. But only someone from Gryffindor could have taken it. I mean, others wouldn't know the password. Or maybe Malfoy finally figured out the brewing method for the polyjuice potion from Snape. Has anyone here lost any hair recently? Ron puffed out his cheeks. "Compared to Malfoy," Harry said anxiously, "I actually think this is more likely Dobby's doing." Chapter 77, Taking a Day Off on Saturday. Apologies, everyone. I need a day to gather my thoughts, so I'm taking a short break. Also, I've confirmed with the editor the book will go live next Friday. Chapter 78, Fear in the Air. In the Gryffindor common room, Percy sat on the sofa, hands covering his face, utterly silent. Fred and George sat opposite him, their attempts to comfort their mutual friend Lee Jordan barely eliciting a reaction. Ron stood by the fireplace, his face pale and drawn, lips mumbling under his breath, looking as though he had just survived a serious illness. Beside him, Harry bounced his legs anxiously, glancing repeatedly toward the common room entrance, as if waiting for someone. I found it! Finally, the portrait of the fat lady swung open, and Hermione crawled through the doorway, out of breath, waving a piece of paper. Seeing Ron unresponsive, Harry jumped up from his chair, eager for Hermione's news. Professor Brain's guess was correct. Hermione's amber eyes gleamed with determination. She thrust the note into Harry's hand and quietly recited its contents. In our country, there are many fearsome beasts and monsters, the most bizarre and deadly of which is the basilisk, also known as the king of serpents. These snakes can grow to immense size and live for several centuries. They hatch from a chicken's egg, incubated by a toad. The basilisk's method of killing is astonishing. Aside from its venomous fangs, its gaze alone is lethal. Anyone who meets its eyes instantly dies. Spiders flee at the sight of a basilisk, for it is their natural enemy. Yet the sound of a rooster also terrifies it, as the crow is deadly to the creature. But Ron finally regained some composure, moving his dry, pale lips and murmuring, "So far, no one has died. If the basilisk's gaze is deadly, then Colin and Justin. That's because no one has directly met the basilisk's eyes." Harry felt as if his stomach had plunged into ice water. His cheeks twitched as he whispered, "Hagrid's rooster was killed. Colin saw it through a camera, which the basilisk then destroyed along with the film. So Colin was only petrified. Justin saw it via nearly headless Nick, who was caught by the basilisk's gaze. But Nick already suffered the fatal gaze. He couldn't die twice, right? And Lady Loris?" Hermione spoke solemnly. "I suspect she saw the basilisk in the reflection of the water in the Myrtle bathroom. Harry, I'm glad you understand now. Riddle deceived you. The creature in the chamber was a basilisk, not some furry monster. Hagrid may very well be innocent." Hermione's conclusion drained the color from Harry's face. He stammered, unsure how to explain why Riddle's memory had misled him. "We need to find Hagrid." After a moment, Harry regained his resolve. "Hagrid has to know something. I don't know why Riddle showed us false memories. It might even be the real culprit. But regardless, Hagrid must hold some crucial information." Professor McGonagall had ordered all students to remain in the common room. Percy's current state made compliance impossible, and the trio had no idea what was happening outside. Harry dashed for the dormitory to grab his invisibility cloak, leaving Hermione and Ron staring at each other in silence. When they quietly slipped out of the common room, the castle was eerily deserted. Not a single student wandered the corridors. Only pairs of professors patrolled the castle, their grim expressions filling Hermione and Ron with dread. Was Ginny still alive? Why would the heir of Slytherin target her? Even Hermione could not answer these questions. What haunted Harry's mind was a horrifying vision. Ginny found as a cold corpse, Mrs. Weasley collapsing over her, wailing, and Mr. Weasley crouched nearby, tearing at the few hairs left on his head. Regret coiled like a venomous snake in Harry's chest. He bitterly wished he had given Riddle's diary to Professor Brain sooner. Brain, hearing only Harry's account, could deduce that the attack had been carried out by a snake moving through the pipes. If Harry had shared the diary directly, he was certain Brain could have uncovered Riddle's deepest secrets. It was a starry night as they hurried toward the glow of Hagrid's window. No one spoke. Only when they reached Hagrid's door did Harry carefully survey the surroundings before removing his invisibility cloak. A few seconds after they knocked, Hagrid flung the door open. They were met with the sight of Hagrid holding a crossbow aimed at them, Fang barking furiously behind him. Hagrid seemed utterly shocked to see them. He looked flustered, water sloshing from his kettle, almost dousing the fire, and then his large hand trembled violently, knocking over the teapot as well. "You've heard about Ginny, haven't you?" Ron glowered at Hagrid, and Hermione remained silent, so Harry had to start the conversation himself. "Oh, yes, I've heard." Hagrid didn't even seem to realize they had come to question him. His voice cracked, and he kept nervously glancing toward the window. Just as he was about to cut a thick slice of fruitcake, a loud knock resounded outside again. Harry swallowed all the questions he had prepared and, with Hermione, dragged the dazed Ron into a corner. Once they were safely hidden, Hagrid grabbed his crossbow again and flung the door open. "Good evening, Hagrid." It was Dumbledore, walking in with a very serious expression. Behind him followed a rather peculiar-looking man. The stranger was short and stout, with gray hair like Professor Brain's, only much messier. His round face was etched with worry. His outfit was an odd combination: a pinstriped suit, a bright red tie, a black cloak, purple-pointed boots, and under his arm a dark green bowler hat. "That's my dad's boss." Ron finally came back to his senses and whispered to Harry and Hermione, "Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic." Hermione elbowed Ron sharply to get him to be quiet. For Hagrid, the worst had finally happened. He slumped onto his bed, pale, fumbling for an explanation. I had no choice, Hagrid." Fudge spoke quickly and crisply. "Terrible, absolutely terrible. Dumbledore told me to remain calm, but after those two students were petrified, I can't even describe the pressure I was under. I had to silence the Daily Prophet. But now this can no longer be hidden. Many at the Ministry are aware that a Weasley child may have suffered a tragedy. I want you to understand, Cornelius, that I have complete trust in Hagrid," Dumbledore said, frowning, his tone solemn, though his blue eyes betrayed a flicker of helplessness. "Sometimes power is unreasonable. Even Dumbledore must adhere to the established structures of society unless he wants to overthrow everything." Fudge, however, seemed resolute. He fiddled with his hat, avoiding Dumbledore's eyes, and spoke casually. "From my perspective, Dumbledore, some precautions are necessary. If it turns out someone else opened the chamber, Hagrid will be released, and the Ministry will offer a full apology." Chapter 79. Expulsion. Fudge's explanation neither reassured Dumbledore nor calmed Hagrid. "I can go with you to the Ministry. You can have the Aurors watch over me, Minister," Hagrid stammered. "But please, don't send me to Azkaban." Before Fudge could respond, another heavy knock echoed at the door. Dumbledore went to open it. This time, Harry felt a sharp jab to his ribs and let out a startled gasp. Lucius Malfoy, having just finished giving Draco some instructions, strode into Hagrid's hut. Wrapped in a long black traveling cloak, his face wore a cold, self-satisfied smile, while Fang barked furiously. "Looks like you've clarified the key issues," Lucius said, nodding with satisfaction. "Excellent. Very good." "What are you doing here?" Hagrid roared in anger. Get out of my house. You are not welcome." "My dear friend, believe me, I am not pleased to be here either. You call this a house? Pardon me, but even the elf quarters at my home are more respectable," Lucius sneered, surveying the small wooden hut. "I almost forgot to mention something to you, Dumbledore. Someone told me you had come here." "And what business brings you here, Lucius?" Dumbledore asked, maintaining his composure, though Harry could clearly see two flames of anger burning in his eyes. Hagrid's hut hadn't been this lively in a long time. Lucius hadn't yet revealed his purpose when Amostar strode directly through the open door. "Seems I've arrived at an inopportune moment?" The moment he stepped into the house, he sensed the air thick with tension, not surprising at all. The reactions of those inside varied. Dumbledore exchanged a brief look with him, saying nothing further. Fudge clearly recognized who Amostar was, but toward this little-known young professor, he remained distant, not even nodding in greeting. Lucius, upon seeing Amos enter, slightly reined in the barely concealed smugness on his face. He knew this man had been brought here by Cacus Flea, a faction of reckless dark wizards very different from the principal Dumbledore. If possible, Lucius had no desire to earn their lasting enmity. "Perfect timing. I had planned to visit you only after informing Dumbledore of some unfortunate news, Amos Tuh." Lucius addressed Amos, who looked slightly surprised. He then produced a parchment from his pocket, his cold gray eyes fixed on Dumbledore, lips curling into a smile. "This is a disaster, Dumbledore." Lucius waved the parchment rudely in front of Dumbledore. "The board should have let you go long ago. This is a temporary suspension. You'll notice all 12 governors have signed it. We feel you've failed to live up to your potential. How many attacks have occurred so far? At this rate, it won't even be summer before every young wizard at Hogwarts is wiped out." Fudge, clearly not having learned of this from Lucius beforehand, was shocked by the board's decision. Yet, as Lucius said, the appointment of the headmaster fell under the governor's authority. He had no grounds to intervene. Hagrid leapt up from the edge of his bed, his wild dark mop of hair brushing the ceiling, and roared, "How many people did you have to threaten, coerce, or blackmail to mimicry?" Malfoy. Amos gave a slight cold snort. Cacus Flea had indeed warned him about this, yet he hadn't expected Lucius to act so efficiently and get this done so quickly. However, neither Hagrid nor Fudge could stop this. Dumbledore, bound to obey the board, spoke slowly and clearly so that everyone could catch every word. "I only truly leave this school when every single one of you has betrayed me. You will see that at Hogwarts, those who seek help always find it." He then gave a strange glance toward a corner. Amos, sensing a subtle presence, followed Dumbledore's gaze, eyes deep. He smiled faintly in his mind, casually shifting his attention. It was then he noticed Lucius studying him. "We'll all miss you, Dumbledore." Lucius grinned, producing another parchment from his pocket, similar to the first. "Now that Dumbledore's matter is settled, Amos Ta, I regret to inform you that the board has also sent a dismissal order for you. Frankly, I never believed sending some unknown fellow as an investigator into Hogwarts would achieve anything. And yet the facts prove my judgment correct. I suggest you pack your things now so you won't miss the earliest train tomorrow." "What exactly do you mean by that?" Amos smiled, showing no surprise. "Of course, I am the board-appointed investigator. You have the right to dismiss me, but I have no intention of leaving Hogwarts just yet." Lucius narrowed his eyes. Even Fudge finally fixed his gaze on Amos. "This is a board order, Brain. Do you intend to defy it?" "I think you've forgotten one thing, Mr. Malfoy," Amos said, smiling pleasantly. "Indeed, I am no longer merely a special investigator, but I remain the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor personally appointed by Dumbledore. The power to dismiss a professor lies solely with the headmaster. Since Hogwarts currently has no headmaster, I must stay until the next one assumes office." Lucius stared coldly at Amos, silent. True, he had overlooked this point. "Very well." After a pause, Lucius Malfoy nodded slowly. "When the next headmaster formally takes office, I will discuss the appointment of faculty with him." With that, Lucius ignored everyone and left. "I trust you already have a plan for what comes next, don't you?" Amos's decision to remain brought a faint smile to Dumbledore's face. Before leaving, he spoke to Amos gently. "Of course," Amostar replied with a smile. "I had no intention of standing on the sidelines." "Please, help me explain, Professor Brain." Under Fudge's escort, Hagrid, looking sullen, hesitated. "You know the situation, Professor Brain. Maybe you can help clear up this misunderstanding." The little hut that had been crowded moments ago was now almost empty. Just Amostar remained. Soon he would return to his office to check how much his surveillance had recorded. But before that, he glanced at the corner of the room and cleared his throat. "This matter here is finished. You three, how much longer are you planning to hide?" Chapter 80, Riddle and Voldemort. Fang pawed desperately at the closed door, whining sorrowfully as if he understood that the hut's owner had gone and whether he would return remained uncertain. "Professor Brain!" Feeling almost suffocated, Harry yanked off the invisibility cloak, gasping for air. He tried to speak several times but couldn't find the words. "Professor, is the Ministry really going to send Hagrid to Azkaban? But he's innocent. I mean, what evidence do they have that proves Hagrid is the heir of Slytherin?" Hermione's voice quavered as she looked at Brain, who was inspecting the invisibility cloak in Harry's hands. "The adult world can be very complicated, Miss Granger," Amostar said, his tone somber. "Dealing with people is complicated, too." He walked over and sat on a stool, rubbing his forehead warily. "That is precisely why, after graduation, I chose to isolate myself, severing ties with my former classmates and seeking a simpler life." Amostar could see the fear in the three young ones' eyes. Perhaps even they hadn't realized just how bewildered they were when Dumbledore had been driven out of Hogwarts by Lucius. Though Dumbledore may not interact with them frequently, over more than half a century, the names Hogwarts and Dumbledore had become almost inseparable. The loss of the headmaster naturally instilled a crushing sense of dread in everyone at the school. For Amostar, however, this was a very good opportunity. Then perhaps you three owe me an explanation. His calm, steady tone made Harry, Hermione, and the grief-stricken Ron feel the tension in the air lighten. They exchanged glances, and finally Harry drew a deep breath and, speaking rapidly, recounted everything about the strange diary. When we learned Ginny was in danger, Hermione immediately went to the library. Using your hints and the information we had gathered, we discovered that the monster in the chamber was likely a basilisk. After that, we came to Hagrid before anyone else to confirm the truth about what happened 50 years ago. Tom Riddle's diary could take you back into the past, showing you events in a first-hand immersive way, correct? Amasta closed his eyes in thought. Having already reviewed his own lost memories, the detailed memory of destroying Voldemort's Horcrux in 5th grade, he immediately recognized that this diary was yet another Horcrux. Incredible. Such foolishness, he murmured to himself, barely audible, splitting one's soul multiple times just to anchor it, ensuring a doomed, decaying body remained in the mortal world. How utterly foolish. Amasta had witnessed the turning of the world. He was perhaps the only person alive who had truly died and returned. Life and death, to him, were like a dream. Voldemort's obsession with life was incomprehensible. Yet, this diary, which had briefly been in Harry's hands, still astonished Amasta in unexpected ways. Having encountered Horcruxes and destroyed Voldemort's himself, he was still surprised that this diary possessed the ability to actively use language to deceive and mislead a person. Why did it have such a high degree of autonomy? I think there is something you may not know. Amasta opened his eyes and looked at the anxious trio, speaking calmly. Tom Riddle is the name Voldemort used while he attended this school, or perhaps it is Voldemort's original name. Clang! The news Amostar whispered hit the three before him like a bolt of lightning. Ron's knees gave way, sending the kettle on the stove crashing to the floor. Hermione screamed, and Harry's face went ashen. So that's it! Harry had no time to wonder how Professor Brain had discovered this. Fighting the nausea and dizziness brought on by his previous encounters with Voldemort's dark magical constructs, he pressed. It was Voldemort. It's always been him. He opened the chamber 50 years ago. He framed Hagrid. Apart from Harry, Professor Brain was the only wizard Ron had ever seen speak the name Voldemort so calmly. Normally, he would have been utterly shocked, but now his heart was consumed by despair. Before hearing the news, he had clung to the hope that finding the chamber in time might save Ginny. But now, not even Ron's optimism could allow him to imagine his sister was safe. Professor Brain! Sweat beaded on Hermione's forehead, a sign that her brilliant mind was racing at full speed. If we report all of this to the Ministry, could Hagrid and Headmaster Dumbledore? If that diary were still intact in your hands, the Ministry might believe us, Miss Granger. Amos understood Hermione's intent, but his reply was disheartening. But now we have no proof that this diary ever existed, nor of the incredible powers it contained. The Ministry will not easily accept the claims of 3 underage wizards. Harry felt an overwhelming guilt. Ron had warned him of the diary's dangers, Hermione had told him to hand it over, yet he had stubbornly kept it. That choice had almost directly led to Ron's sister's peril. Amos remained silent, deep in thought. From Harry's description, he deduced that the diary was merely a vessel for Voldemort's consciousness. It had no independent agency. All attacks in the first half of the term were carried out through the diary, likely using one student as its instrument. Based on current evidence, that student was probably Ginny Weasley. But how had Ginny obtained Voldemort's Horcrux? Had she, like Amos years ago, stumbled upon a hidden relic within the castle? And another pressing question, was Ginny still alive? Amos believed the Horcrux was unlikely to kill Ginny outright. Doing so would be far too wasteful. He understood Horcruxes. They served 2 main functions. First, to anchor a fragmented soul to the living world when the original body faced mortal peril, thus preventing the creator's death. Second, to resurrect the original soul, achieved by draining the life force of anyone in contact with it, a truth Amos knew all too well. Absorbing life force was not instantaneous. Based on his recent observations of Ginny, her vitality was still strong. In other words, for Voldemort's Horcrux to completely drain her in just a few hours would be no easy task. But if this dragged on until sunrise, Ginny's fate could become uncertain. Chapter 81. The location of the chamber. A thick blanket of clouds slid across the sky, obscuring the full moon. Sharp winds swept through Hogwarts's broad lawns, rustling with an ominous force. The castle glowed with countless lights, yet the flickering candles seemed tinged with an inexplicable fear. Amos personally escorted the three distraught young wizards back to the Gryffindor common room. Harry, sensing that Amos was about to act, stood before the fat lady's portrait and asked if he could do something to help. "It's all my fault." Harry avoided Ron's eyes, lowering his head in sorrow. "If I had been more alert, if I hadn't trusted that diary so easily, maybe Ginny wouldn't have been taken to the chamber. Hagrid wouldn't have been taken by the Ministry, and Lucius Malfoy wouldn't have had the chance to oust Dumbledore." "This isn't your fault, Harry." Hermione gently patted his back. "Even wizards far more experienced than you could not resist the manipulations of that mysterious figure. None of us realized the diary harbored such malice. Hogwarts cannot bear the loss of another student, Potter." Amasta's memories hidden in the dormitory revealed certain key information, though they did not disclose the precise location of the chamber. He looked at the despondent Harry, a faintly meaningful smile on his face. "The basilisk in the chamber is not something an ungraduated student could easily handle. If you encounter it, remember, never make eye contact." On his way back, Amasta passed by the school infirmary on the 4th floor and found Professor McGonagall in a fury, scolding a group of upper-year Hufflepuff girls. Seeing Amasta approaching from a distance, she stopped berating them and instructed Filch to escort the girls back to their dormitories. "These students." McGonagall's face was ashen. She clenched her lips, speaking each word with visible effort. "They actually snuck out to find Gilderoy, hoping he could help deal with the hair. It's ridiculous. Even Albus is powerless in the face of this." "One could say Professor Lockhart's books were surprisingly persuasive in their day," Amasta shrugged. Then he noticed McGonagall producing a lace handkerchief to gently wipe her square-framed glasses, her voice thick with nasal frustration. "When Fudge came by earlier, he told me that tomorrow, Rufus Scrimgeour, head of the Auror office, will move into the castle to conduct a thorough investigation of Hogwarts, including all students and staff. I just hope whoever is behind this has the decency to feel ashamed and step forward. I still don't know how to explain to Arthur and Molly that Hogwarts couldn't protect their daughter." After Amasta calmed McGonagall and collected the panoramic scopes he had installed throughout the corridors, he returned to his office. By now, it was past 10 o'clock at night. Half of the surveillance wall in his office was still operational. From the Gryffindor dormitory up to the 3rd floor, all the footage was shrouded in darkness. The 3rd floor, huh? From this alone, Amasta confirmed a key piece of information. Sitting cross-legged, he laid out the scopes damaged by the freezing curse and began repairing each magical conduit. Due to the extent of the damage, it took him a considerable amount of time to restore them. By 11 o'clock, Amasta stood, wand in hand, pointing at the scopes on the floor. Guided by his magic, hundreds, perhaps thousands of golden threads of light coalesced midair into frozen frames. The remaining information in these frames caused Amasta to narrow his eyes. As expected, no one appeared in the footage besides Ginny Weasley. Amasta watched as Ginny, clutching a black diary, emerged from behind the fat lady's portrait. She cast a deep, sinister smile toward the locations of the panoramic scopes in the corridor before swinging her wand. The previously stable images trembled violently and then went completely dark. Ginny's last known position was on the 3rd floor, at the corner of the staircase, where she methodically sabotaged Amasta's scopes. Her final destination remained unknown. Amasta double-checked the 2nd and 1st floor footage and confirmed that Ginny had not descended further. Her last position was indeed the 3rd floor. Interesting. What could be on the 3rd floor? Could the entrance to the Slytherin chamber really be there? Knock! 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 Just as Amasta's thoughts briefly drifted, the office door suddenly slammed with urgency. The rhythm and intensity suggested the visitor was in a state of extreme agitation. Though the door remained closed, Amasta sensed through his magical perception who it was, and his expression shifted slightly. "Miss Granger?" Amasta's fingers moved, and the office door clicked open. Hermione, almost losing her balance, tumbled inside. Can you explain why, at this dead of night, you chose to defy school rules and Professor McGonagall's orders to come to my office? Professor Brain. Under normal circumstances, Hermione might have trembled and apologized at a professor speaking so sternly, but now she ignored Amasta's furrowed brow. She rushed to stand before him in 3 quick steps, restraining herself from grabbing his sleeve, her voice nonetheless urgent. Professor, we've discovered the location of the chamber. Amasta's brow immediately furrowed. He studied the young witch carefully, and in an instant he knew Hermione was telling the truth.